Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith here with
Jim Groom,
who appears to be in his basement in Italy, and that's a great place to be considering.
Can I tell you a little
Yeah. Oh, sure. I was going to do my intro, but that's fine. It's okay. Go right ahead.
No. Save your fucking intro, okay?
No.
You listen to me. I'm here in Italy, in the basement, because it's the only place that you can survive right now. We've been going on like 11 days of 90 plus.
Oh my God.
Weather. There's no air conditioning, so it's just fans. And my kids grab the fans. They steal the fans, so there's not enough fans. It's rough. So I'm down here, kind of hunkering in the basement, hoping things start to cool down.
How hard is it for an Italian family just to buy a fucking mini split?
It's hard. Everything is hard here. And we're going to talk about that in today's episode. But nothing is easy.
Yeah, because today's episode, our final film this is episode 74, and basically episodes 69 through 74 were our international 90s independent cinema tour, and we've gone to, I kind of have it as, we started in Australia with Muriel's Wedding, next to Iran with the White Balloon, then we went to the UK for Life is Sweet, Raise the Red Lantern, next was Central Station in Brazil.
Raise the Red Lantern.
It was Raise the Red Lantern. Then we went to, and then we have this nice kind of sibling pair of films, which are both road movies. We did Central Station last week with Brazil, and that one was more of a piece of poetry, kind of a love letter to Brazil feeling itself as this space and place in the world to be, and its cinema as well. Whereas this film is kind of steering the opposite direction as a road film. And it's like, Italy's really fucked up. We have a lot of more stuff to work on. And this film...
it's funny, like a quick anecdote before I get into some of the production notes. So I see this film.
Wait, we got to say what the movie is. It's Il Ladro di Bambini.
Il Ladro di Bambini, exactly. Yeah. Which in English they translate as Stolen Children, which really doesn't work because the title is actually The Child Thief. Right? And the thief of children, right? So that thief, that's what it really translates to. And I think that's important because it's a theme that goes through, like stealing the childhoods, stealing the innocence, stealing all these things, like who does it when. So I think the Italian title goes much better. But anyway, 1992, I see this film, right? And this is like one of my first, like I hadn't seen Fellini and all that shit yet. And I was kind of like, what the fuck's going on in Italy?
Yeah.
So then, like 8 years later, whatever, I meet my soon-to-be wife, Antonella, and I'm like, yeah, man, what's it like over there? Like how are things in Italy? Because I saw this movie, Il Ladro di Bambini, and it looks fucked up. Like, what are you talking about? So like this was my one insight to Italy, which shows you just how, contextually, although it's an interesting insight at an interesting point in time, but that's a kind of funny story. And Antonella hadn't even seen the movie. So she's like, what? Johnny Amello? Who the hell's that? So that is the director of this film.
Yeah.
This film is in 1992. It was written also by Amelio and Sandra Petraia, forgive me for my pronunciation, Stefano Rulli, and Giorgio Cecere.
That's a lot of writers.
Yeah, that's a lot. And it actually stars, and I think we both talked about this before, Enrico Loverso. He plays the lead character of Antonio. And he's super good.
He's a Carabinieri.
He's a Carabinieri. Very good pronunciation. And so he's wonderful. And what Johnny Amelio did for this film is he basically harkened back to the old gold Italian neo-realism. He wanted real people. He didn't want actors. And while Loverso had acted in a bunch of small things, he was at the very beginning of his career. There were some discussions amongst the producers like, hey, we want Antonio Banderas to play this role.
Wow,
He'll be perfect. And Emilio stuck to his guns, and he's like, I want this kid. He was doing the Italian voiceover for Banderas, and the more he did it, the more Emilio was like, no, this guy is great. We're going to keep him. So how he took the role, and I think in many ways he makes the movie. So it was a really good decision on that part. Another interesting thing just about the geography of Italy. There's a big split, kind of like in America, between the North and the South, right? The North industrial part. Milan is kind of not only the fashion center, but it's also the industrial center. Cities like Piemonte, where they make all the cars, Trento in the Alps. Like the North is known for being not only industrial, but rich. And the South is known for being poor or poorer. And often there's a strife between them. South more agricultural, and so it's interesting that this movie is a road trip, but it's a road trip from Milan, which is kind of the economic center, the New York, if you will, of Italy, back down to Sicily, right? So it's a move out of the city into the country. And I think you see that a lot also with the other movie we watched, Central Station. Right? It's a move from that populated area where you're all about isolation out to the country. Right. And maybe it doesn't have the same back, but it's an interesting just for the geography of that. The other thing worth noting is it was a Cannes jury prize winner. So it didn't win the Palme d'Or, but it won the one right under it. And so
second place. Woohoo!
Exactly. So, it did pretty good, I guess. And it was elected or nominated by Italy for the Academy Awards, but it wasn't selected. But it did. It kind of launched his career. He made in 1994 after this another movie which deals with the Italian identity called L'America, which is a film I haven't seen, so I have to see. Me and Antonella said we're going to watch it. The other thing worth talking about, and I won't go too deep into this, but when I was talking about the movie and watching it with Antonella and my kids were kind of, around, we talked about the fact that Antonella was like, yeah, these are the years. 1992 was this year of this big kind of, revelation called Mani Pulite, which means clean hands, there was this guy, Di Pietro, who essentially, amongst other judges, was like, it's time to put our feet down and start holding all the corruption in Italy accountable. I guess the idea was you couldn't do anything without a bribe. Like everything was like, you want something done, here's the money. And this went for housing, like they talk about in this movie, but just about every factor of life. And in fact, when they opened up this and started to do this investigation, the two political parties that were running the country, essentially the Social Democrats, or is that what it is? I forget. No, the Christian Democrats and the Socialist Party, once this kind of hit and all of these kind of, all of this like corruption had been laid bare, those parties fell. And it was the fall of what they call the First Republic, which was the government after World War II, after fascism had been in power for that long, it fell. And so it was like a huge moment in Italian politics. The other thing that happened in 1992, because it's a hell of a year for Italy, Michael, and because I'm here, I kind of know this. My kids were like, 1992 was kind of like Italy's 9/11 moment. I was like, what? They're like, yeah, well, two judges, Falcone and Borsellino, who were magistrates, I guess, not really judges, but what they call magistrates here, they were the ones who were behind trying to kind of go after Cosa Nostra or the Sicilian mob. And they did. But as retribution, the mob, this particularly guy called Rina, actually had Falcone bombed. Him and his wife and three other guards were in a car on a highway, and they remote control bombed the entire highway. And the highway just collapsed, and they died. 57 days later, they had a car bomb under Borsellino's car, and he was killed. And the whole country was like, what the fuck? Like, there is no law and order anymore, right? We have all this corruption. Basically, the mob's deciding who they kill of our kind of political infrastructure. Like, it was kind of like the 60s in the US, right? Where people keep on getting assassinated and going down. And I think this was a moment. This film, the backdrop of it is a broader moment of kind of political corruption that almost comes to a head in 92. So those are my production notes. Sorry, I was very indulgent, but my family actually had I have a little something to contribute. My knowledge is limited, but luckily I have good researchers behind me.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the notes that I think is interesting is that, you're describing how Northern Italy, it's the more wealthy, cosmopolitan, steeped in manufacturing part of the country. Yet the film starts with an impoverished set of, basically blanking, public housing.
Tenements,
yeah, public housing that projects. It starts in the projects. Thank you, my brain, Jesus. And what's so interesting and is that in that context, we're just we don't see the Milan you're talking about at all, right? And instead, it's this very kind of grim space in which basically we're introduced to a mother who's kind of ignoring her son, and then she goes to try to get her daughter to wake up from in her bedroom, and she's ignoring her. And then she pushes her son Luciano out the door with money for ice cream, and he sits forlornly on the stairs, and then a man passes by and says hi, and he ignores her, and he's suddenly in the apartment and going into the daughter Rosetta's room, and the mother is sitting there like staring grimly at this situation with money in her hands, and then Luciano has his money, and then the entire place blows up, right?
Yeah.
Like suddenly the mother and this man are being arrested, and Rosetta is being towed behind. And this is the MacGuffin of the film. Well, MacGuffin, Jesus, like that's a sad use of that phrase.
Yeah, you love that term. And then it's like, oh yeah, child prostitution. It's a MacGuffin.
Yeah, and Rosetta, the 11-year-old, had been being prostituted by her mother. And this is the beginning of one of the major stories of this film is like basically impoverished and abused children at the mercy of an uncaring system, right? Because it happens immediately because the sister is drawn out, Rosetta, and Luciano's just left behind. Like he's literally forgotten initially. He's like, whoa, what the fuck's going on? You should see him looking out over.
Which is identical to Josh Way in the Central Station.
Yeah.
His mom is killed. He's left there like a stray cat.
Yep.
And then, the system is completely ignoring him. And like, it's interesting the parallels between Central Station and this film. And to your point, the authorities come in and the mother's screaming and the guy is like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And it's a powerful scene and the Carbonieri like go off. But like, there's this sense of the kid like being left behind, and the big show of the kind of breakdown on child prostitution, right? That's the headline. But everything behind that you don't see, right?
No. And they're immediately like it's this system of control where kids have no pathway. They have no advocates. Like a modern system now has like social workers that are actually advocates for children in these contexts. In effectively acting as a pseudo parent, so that they can try their best to understand what the children are navigating and their needs and whatnot. And this is important because, instead the system gives them to Carabinieri, right? And tell us like what my read it, because I don't understand what they are. Like they read kind of like they're the national police, or are they kind of like the FBI? What are the Carabinieri?
Yeah, so there's local police in any Italian city, and they deal with like traffic stops and particular things, tickets and stuff. And then there's Carbonieri. They deal with like drugs, murder, kind of like the level up, almost like detectives, right?
Okay.
And then I don't know what the federal FBI would be in Italy. Someone else might know that. I've never really
Oh,
heard
okay.
of that term, but like every city has carabinieri, and
Oh, okay.
carabinieri can come from anywhere in Italy. It's kind of like a post officio. It's like once you get the job, you're set for life. But they say, okay, like he was from Calabria, Antonio, he was sent up to Milan. And
Mm.
so, like, no matter where you are, it's a federal job. Once you sign up for it, they decide what city you work in, right? So
Okay.
we'll have people here in Trento who are working here, but they're maybe from Bologna, or they're from Rome, or they're from some other part of Italy.
So instead of rather like the more sensible, one would think having a social worker being assigned to these children to transport them, because this is the beginning of the journey. It's like these children need to be rehomed. It's like we don't really care about like the backstory of the mother and the father, and we learn little bits here and there, but it's very much about like who are going to be these children's caretakers. And well, there's this lovely Catholic orphanage that they're going to be going to, and it's these two carabinieri that are assigned to this task. And what's really interesting is one of them, Grignani, immediately ditches Antonio. He like first he like gets out of his uniform, and their uniforms are wonderful because they're very like officious, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
they
They're
have
dark blue and red, and they got the hat. Yeah, they're like military dress blues.
Exactly. And yeah, they seem like they're in their like nice uniforms. And Grignani ditches his and says, "Oh, you should change too because it'll be best for the kids, so they don't feel." Like they're having this overlord, this system of bureaucratic overload over them. But in reality, he's literally changing so he can ditch Antonio. And he immediately gets off the train and he gives him all these instructions. And what's so important about this is, Enrico Laverso's kind of appearance is he's incredibly young looking. He's probably like 27, we guess, based on the dates.
Yeah.
But he looks like 22, right?
He does.
And he has this baby face, and he's beautiful, but and we don't know.
He's got this jean jacket, right? He'd like as soon as he gets out of his official uniform,
which he also
looks
does,
like a kid, because he does it as well. Because his partner says you should get out of that. You don't want to scare the kids. Like you said, though, the partner has ulterior motives, but he looks as soon as he takes that uniform off, he transforms. Mm-hmm. Which is a really powerful piece of this movie, because throughout the movie, people are like, why are you in your uniform? Where's your uniform? Like, it's always coming up again. But I mean, it's really, I think Amello is doing a really good job of like suggesting like what happens when you kind of remove, your relationship to the state,
right,
and you stay somewhat bare. And there, it's kind of coming again and again up at various points in the movie.
Yeah, and very much the beginning is about like them navigating these systems, because the very first one they do make it to this Catholic orphanage, but immediately the priest basically rejects them. And in particular, he's speaking of Rosetta. She doesn't have the proper paperwork. Her medical's missing. And it's like, hey, this is all going to be for their own, and everyone else is good. And, but Rosetta understands that it's about her. And so it's like, the institution is using this language of care as a means to reject them ultimately, which is really fucked up, of course. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And you made a good point in your notes. And, obviously any state bureaucracy can be, suffocating. Italy definitely has its own version of that. And I've been through it. And, but although I have to say, it's been no more than sometimes my run-ins in the U.S. So
like the DMV,
exactly. Like you can have or like trying to get a passport, whatever. You can have your own issues depending upon the time and the place. But when they're in the orphanage and Antonio's trying to deal with the priest, and the priest has given them the runaround, the kids are kind of left to walk around the orphanage.
Yeah.
And those are great scenes. You talk about it, but I really love those scenes.
Yeah. At first it's, it's mostly focused on Luciano, because Luciano is the wanderer. He's the boy. He's only like 9. And what's also really interesting is he literally has not spoken yet in the entire film. He's been engaged with on numerous occasions, mostly by Antonio the Carabinieri. He was asleep in the cabin, the train cabin initially, and it was so cute. He has this like little bag of like puzzle pieces right in front of him, and just to like, there's all these visual artifacts across this film that are really intentional, and I really appreciate that, and we'll get into a few others. And so, but Luciano's the wanderer, and he kind of makes his way and finds a classroom, and there's this nun, and it's a room of like dozens of boys and girls, and she's literally doing dictation from, you don't know what it, maybe it's the Bible, most likely, right? And she says and she's making them write this down word for word, because she literally enunciates period or comma, and so they get the sentence perfectly. And that's like that rigidity of systems. But she's saying life is a gift and it must be lived as such. And the way she says it, she does it in part by part by part, because she has to detail it that way. And Luciano is standing by this, and like, you know, the reality is it's this a message of what it's supposed to be, but in reality their lives are much, much different. And we see that specifically because Luciano ventures further upstairs, and he finds the cavernous room filled with like rows and rows of beds, and there's this one girl who's singing aloud this banana song about a sick fish that's trying to get in the hospital and can't. And you're like, and she's also has no hair. You're like, is she like a cancer patient? You don't know what the fuck's going on. And it's so cute because Luciano just engages her, and this is his first words in the film, as he asks her, it's like, hey, are you a boy and a girl? And she just points to her earrings. It's like, I'm a femme, I'm a girl, of course.
Yeah.
And but that's it. And then, but that's the beginning of, we hear Rosetta continue about no place is really prepared to take responsibility for them. Right. And Rosetta knows that this trip's useless because nobody wants her. And it's very important how cognizant she is of the kind of scarlet letter she's kind of wearing as an 11-year-old, of a sense. Right.
Yeah. She is obviously forced by her mother and the situation she was in, economics, whatever, to own the fact that she's an 11-year-old prostitute whose picture has been blasted across the media in Italy. And so everybody knows, basically what her situation is, or eventually finds out. And she's kind of in this situation, like she knows better than, like, Antonio seems like the child in some ways at this point, because he kind of has this relationship where he's like, I shouldn't be doing this job anyway.
Right.
I don't know why they have a Carabinieri to do a woman's work. This should be a social work, right? Like he talks like this, but like she's clear on the implications of what her mother has put her through and what that means for the rest of her life. And that's what makes Rosetta such a powerful character and played so well is, she's an 11-year-old who's been forced to be a 30-year-old to deal with the world.
Yeah.
And it's really painful to watch.
Yeah. And the institutions that are supposed to be protecting her are treating her like she's the actual problem ultimately. And that's the tragedy of it all. But so the funny thing is, like, so basically Antonio like lies to the kids initially and is like saying, yeah, they're getting your room ready. And meanwhile, he goes outside and he calls Grignati, the other Carabinieri that ditched him. He's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And Grignati is like, basically it's like, because he's trying to
nothing for him.
Nothing. And so, he takes it upon himself to make the next trip to, now we're hitting the middle of the country, right? Or no?
Yeah, because we were in Rome. We were right outside of Rome. I think it's called Civicità, I think it was called, or some version of that, which is right outside of Rome. And now we're going down to Calabria, where he's from. And Calabria is right the kind of heel of the boot, or Puglia's at
the tip of the boot. It's the tip of the boot,
right? So he's there, and then they're going to go over to Sicily, which is the island. So that's the next stop is Calabria. And
this is probably my favorite part of the film, because he makes this stopover at his sister's home. But the setup, we don't realize this initially. It's this crazy seaside street, that's like cars are driving like 40, 50 miles per hour. And it's this, concrete cinder block structure, and there's cars parked in front, and we're entering this space. And you're just like, what the hell is this place that they're going to? Because it's not obviously an institutional space at all. It's an unfinished structure building wise. But immediately when we walk in, it's this really warm space of a lot of familial activity, because his sister has created this with her husband and her family, um, built this home slash restaurant, right? And there's a first communion celebration going on. And so we enter into this celebratory, classic Italian family style space. And it's not just because my sense of the family exists as a communal situation. It's like this extended community. And his sister speaks of like, we did this because there's all these community things that we can serve, whether it's first communion or other celebrations, that happen, particularly tied to religious, various like Catholic ceremonies and stuff like that. And, and it's also this wonderful place of work, for people in the community too. Like the first person Antonio interacts with is this boy is like, hey, what are you doing, sir? Like, we're closed. There's a private event. And then Antonio's like, you know me, you little rascal.
Exactly.
And it's really warm and wonderful. And it's obviously this incredibly stark contrast of where we started, which was the home of Rosetta and Luciano.
Yeah, because we really went to Rosetta, from Rosetta's home to the train to the orphanage, and now we're here. And like you said, this is a real family situation. And the sister's like, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" And she takes her upstairs, and then she starts talking about the fact that the house is half done.
Right.
And so the bottom restaurant part is kind of finished and polished, whereas the upstairs where they live is completely ramshackle, right? You have like sheets that separate bedrooms. She says it's basically like a refugee camp.
And there's stuff everywhere. And she's like there's like piles of knickknacks and all things that are part of a real family. And it's not like it's like it's a beautiful mess, if you will, right?
Yeah, totally.
And she's like, where are the towels? Where are the towels? Oh, how's grandma? Grandma's crazy. She's driving everybody mad. And so there's this lovely familiar conversation that's going on by this. But, to complement this, like it's a refugee camp, she also has this incredibly, future forward thinking about it. She's like, step by step, I'll make this house as I want it. And she also says like, and there's another floor to be built for you, Antonio, for when you get married. Like, this is our future as a family, right?
Yeah, totally. And then she says, okay, you guys, where are you going to stay? Take a shower. And that's one of those weird moments in the film, right? Like, am I jumping ahead, or is that?
No, it's okay.
But it's a weird moment in the film where, Rosetta's going to finally take a shower and the kids, and, Antonio, which is so well played, is like awkward. He's like, "Oh, I wasn't even thinking like that." She's like, "Are you going to leave?" And then he goes out, then he kind of goes out onto the patio that overlooks the ocean. And he sees
the
his
roof,
grandmother,
basically.
The roof, right? And he overlooks the ocean and sees his grandmother down by the garden. And Luciano's checking him out the whole time. But the dynamic of that, what is soon to be like this kind of pseudo family, starts to emerge in this house in an interesting way. Like the dynamics, you start to feel he's just not a caretaker anymore. As much as he still has that role, you start to feel like him being in his family surroundings changes his relationship to them. And he's never clear with them about what he's doing with them. He lies. He says, these are the kids of my bosses, the Major Carabinieri, and they have to go back to Sicily. So he asked me to bring them back. He never says that, these are the kids who are part of a prostitution ring up in Milan that I'm trying to get into an orphanage, right?
Well, but it's wonderful because he's trying to protect them, right? Because he's already seen like basically what happens when people hear Rosetta's story, like with the priest and how she's immediately rejected. And, a big part of this moment, as you've already begun to describe, is it's also an opportunity he creates a space for the first time for Luciano and his sister Rosetta to behave like kids. And
Yeah.
and part of that, which is so awesome, is that functions helps make that function is storytelling. It's telling stories about family. Like, so we had the sister first, right? She's like her plans for the future of the family and how what they're doing right now. And, and as they went through the kitchen before, and he's like saying hi to some guy who's working the kitchen, and Tony was like, "Hey, I know you. We got to talk later," and it's really wonderful. And it also, like, because Antonio, when he goes up in the roof, and finds Luciano, who still won't talk to him and is yet to speak to him at this moment. He's telling him, it's like, that was my village, right up, further up the mountain right there. This is a perfect place. We're down by the sea, and in front of us and behind us is the mountain, but the village is dead now. And this is the beginning of the economic story we're also learning, because we've seen a little bit of that. Like, we've kind of not spoken about it yet, but the navigation of sidewalks as they travel from station to station, it's often, we're seeing a lot of like, dysfunctional spaces, like parks that are filled with garbage, or streets that are, under construction or are broken down. And so he's alluding to, like, basically the only way to make a living, everybody had to leave the village. Like, his sister got closer to the sea where there's work and maybe tourists and stuff like that. But it's really funny because it's really loud, right? It's,
it's on a main road. And while he's even talking with his grandmother later, all you hear are the cars pass by. It's so intentional to make that discomfort of how the space has kind of been invaded. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But it is a space that, like, his sister accepts as like the future, and it's a real one. It's one that, even he imagines in front of Luciano. It's like, I could see myself coming back here. I would like to do that someday. And so we recognize that connection. And then, what's really interesting is immediately the kids are invited to be part of the big family photo. And I didn't include it, as it was one of the ones I considered as the background for this episode. And you can see Rosetta especially is awkward about this. It's like, I'm not in this. I'm not part of this family. Why am I here? And he's like, just look forward, be part of this. And he's really encouraging her, just live in the moment, be a kid, allow yourself to be a kid, because it is a community photo. It's not like a direct family photo. And so at the least in this moment, she's invited to be part of the community. And then there's this lovely thing where she finds a girl her age too, right?
Yeah, and she does her hair.
Yeah.
And she's braiding her hair, and they're talking, and like, you feel like, wow, this kid finally gets a break from the kind of emotional, like, load she's had to cover. And Luciano's also, when they're at the kids' table, and she's like, I want to go to the kids' table. Where's the kids' table? Right? Like, you could see, like, she wants to check out and just live like a normal kid. And I think it's at that point where you go to the adult table. And this is an interesting moment in the movie where the adult table, you get a sense that obviously Antonio has history here, and there's people who know him, and they talk about how he's changed since he's left. And now, where's your uniform comes up again. Why aren't you in your uniform? But then they start talking about, how things get done in Calabria, or this particular town in Calabria. And that's a great kind of allusion to the corruption we talked about with Mani Politi and all the stuff, or Tangentopoli, I think they call it, where all the kind of, to get anything done in Italy in 1992 or in the years leading up to it, it meant you had to pay someone, or you need to know someone, or you need to be in on the kill. And there was a person at the table saying, look, in order to get anything done, we had a doctor here, and the doctor would basically put us all on disability so we didn't have to work. And
it's so funny. And he's like totally on board with this, which is so great. And Antonio's like kind of looking like, it's kind of like these moments. There's these moments in my relationship with my wife where we're talking to people, and people start to say things that, because my wife is so calm and people will say crazy things, and she'll be so calm, and she'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And my brain is just like, wait, what? What's going on? I'm just so confused. And this was one of those moments where Antonio's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, because he's the law, right?
He's the law. He's law and order.
Yeah.
And Law and Order seems so naive, right?
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think that's the thing. It's like, and they're like, come on, Antonio, things got to get done. And then there's this whole question that comes up around housing. It's
Yeah.
like you buy property, but you're not able to build on it. And the thing there is, of course, you're not able to build on it until you pay somebody
Right.
or until someone gets greased, and then you can build on it. And that's what the sister was saying too. Like, we wouldn't have been able to build on this we hadn't have, greased the hands of this politician or this builder or whatever. And I think that was just business as usual. And it shows you that Antonio's kind of truly like a boy. Like,
Yeah.
he really doesn't understand how things are working in Italy. Whether it's right or wrong, not really the point. But obviously, the director is using this moment back with the family, with him now as this kind of, I don't know, kind of a figure of power, or at least of authority, to show like how out of whack you are with how things are being done in the place you grew up in, right?
Yeah.
Not even like some foreign place, the place you grew up in.
Yeah. And, it's the beginning of Antonio realizing like the lesson he's getting with like navigating and making decisions with the children. He's moving away from, and we're going to talk a lot more about the, making decisions of the system, but making decisions on his own. Um, and he's seeing that because he's also been obstructed. It's like the orphanage won't take the kids, and in Rosetta's history makes things seem bad, and so he's starting to bend to give like these two abused children some normalcy. But before we like kind of move on, I think because we haven't gone on, it's like we haven't talked about the grandmother yet, and I
Yeah.
think she's so important. Like, she represents the continuity of family, right? The intergenerational continuity that is the history of like many families that stay together in villages, in particular. But also, just this is how you know family kind of exists. And I think we've talked about this in the past, and the idea of telling stories to our children of how they were before they could even had memories, like, and then those stories become part of their identity, even though and become a memory, even though they couldn't possibly have remembered it
We
because they
talked
were too
about that
young.
last week,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. And so the way that this is presented is there's twofold. So Antonio, we saw like he sees his grandmother from the roof, prior to like going into the party, and he goes down to her, and it's probably one of the most beautiful. Like, this is where like Enrico Laverso is like so immersed in, like we said, being almost like a child, and
Yeah.
he pitches himself like perfectly, because he sits with her, and it's so funny because it's this scrabbled little garden with surrounded by like rocks right by the road. It's
The
crazy
cars are
loud.
going
Yeah.
by.
And
Exactly.
she's like basically, I'm deaf, and he's probably thinking, well, thank God, otherwise you'd be terrified, like think you're gonna be run over at any moment. But he's like basically saying, and she's like insanely excited to see him. It's like, you're so big. And he said, in the most charming moment is like, I did what you told me to do. I found a job. I've lived an honest life, as she taught him, she says to
Yeah.
him. And the way that they embrace, it's like so intimate, right? It's like
Yeah.
so
Totally.
real and lived. And why this is so important is she becomes this character that begins a bridge for Luciano, right? Which is really important because Luciano, as we've said, has basically been uncommunicative for the most of the picture so far.
He's almost traumatized, right,
Oh
by
yeah,
what he's been through.
yeah. I mean, the stuff he's heard in his house, and the way he's shoved out of the house, and his mother, and we basically calls him a sissy. It's like, you're useless. Like, what kind of boy are you? You don't hang out with boys and do boy things. But she reaches out to him at the table, and they're sitting just together, and she has all these pictures, right? And the
Yeah.
most important picture she shows him is a photo of Antonio at his age, basically, and he's wearing this Zorro outfit, which is amazing. He looks ridiculous, like it was like Halloween or something, and he's very costumed, and he's got this big grin, and it doesn't, you don't see it mean anything to Luciano yet, but we're going to learn that this is kind of the thing that cracks into Luciano's like vision of the Carabinieri. Like, he's not just this official; he was a child too.
Yeah, it gives Antonio history, like you said,
Yeah,
and the grandmother with the pictures, the sister, like this coming home, as you pointed to, and this being such a pivotal moment in the film, actually gives the kids something like they really haven't had. This
Right.
sense of family, this sense of a place you can go back to, sense of a place where you're safe, right? Like this is for them very odd. And
Yeah.
Luciano sitting on the roof, kind of hiding in the corner, trying to make sense of it. And you know, it's an interesting, well placed moment right at the center of the film to kind of really bond these characters
Yeah.
and like bond them in a way that doesn't seem forced, right?
No.
It seems really, you know, this like you could really have this moment with these kids, and that's really done well. I think it's a brilliant kind of execution of bringing them all together.
Right. And this is the contrast to where Antonio has come from, where he has said like his job is women's work. Like I'm a carabinieri. What am I doing with these
Yeah,
kids? And there's
totally.
these really funny scenes that had happened earlier where he, they make a pit stop before they head to Calabrese, where they go to another Carbinieri, like a bachelor pad. There's like two Carbinieri living together. And it's actually really funny because he's like, what the fuck do we do to one of his friends who's also maybe they like train together and they're stationed at different places. But we're first meet this other guy who just randomly walks in and he sees Rosetta and he sees like her watching TV. And then he sees this kid asleep in his bedroom because Luciano, we find out, has asthma and he's had an asthma attack and he needs to rest. And it's kind of a really funny moment. It's, this is part of like, oh, I know what this is because I follow European soccer and football. And on his wall, the Carbinieri is like, Napoli. There's Maradona because Maradona was part of the Renaissance of Napoli in the 80s. And there's naked women and then so they're chatting. He's like, you're not sleeping in my bed tonight. And he's like, okay. And he starts to get out. It's like, you're fine. So he's joking with him. And then he kind of, what's cool is Luciano catches like, oh, this guy's cool. And he's like, but I'm an Inter Milan fan, basically. He's like, and he's like,
exactly.
And the Carbiani like comes right back at him. It's like, oh, well, good thing you can't breathe then, right? It's like, and that gets the briefest little smirk out of Luciano because he's a boy. He likes sports. He likes football,
Yeah.
and so, but Antonio's just like still like kind of what the fuck. And it isn't until, the sister's house, he does start this transition.
He
Right.
does.
And the most important, you go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, and it comes to a head.
Right. Exactly. You
One
tell
of
what
the
happens.
women, I'll start it and you
Yeah.
can finish it. One of the women at the table, as they're talking about this political stuff, is looking over at Rosetta as she's playing with what happens to be her daughter and saying, I've seen her before. I've seen her before. And she keeps on insisting on it. And, Antonio's just kind of blowing it off. Like, what do you mean you've seen her? You haven't seen her before. What do you mean? And so she goes over there to her and she's talking to her. And then she starts to actually kind of interrogate her.
Yeah.
And it's a weird moment. Antonella, as we were watching, is like, why doesn't he stop it? Right? Like she's like, because Antonio's kind of sitting back looking at, his family friend or whatever, long childhood friend, go over to Rosetta and start the interrogation. And you can see Rosetta slowly getting less and less comfortable and more like, what the fuck? And, Antonella's like, why doesn't he get up and stop it? Because it's one of those moments in films that are so uncomfortable. And you're like, please don't, because she's finally got a break. Don't go back there.
He doesn't know yet. He hasn't become like the father figure quite yet. He hasn't become the caretaker. But he knows it's wrong, right? And he's staring down the situation. And this stare is important because he's already spent, moments in this film watching over the children in his role as the Carbinieri, that's the escort, versus the Carbinieri that's turning into this kind of person that's almost like a father figure for however brief it is, and trying to create a context for them to be children, normal as much as they're possibly allowed. And he's like, he sits outside the cabin, right? When they go on the train trips twice, he's done this where they're comfortably in the cabin and he sits on this flip chair that's just right by the entrance to their cabin. And he also, has played this role where they're in one of the stations and Rosetta walks away and he's like, fuck, it's an 11-year-old girl in this public space. And he finds her in the bathroom and it goes terribly wrong because she walks away from him and she refuses and she's going to run away. And he has to get physical with her. And that's really complicated because this is a person who has had sexual violence in her life and the physicality of men, and he suddenly doesn't know what to do with this because she's like, I'm going to like turn you in and say that you touched me, and he doesn't know what to do and navigate it. And that's in part, I think, informs why, as he's watching this, and the way he's watching them is different now. He's not watching them to be their like kind of escort and protect. He's watching as like a parent would watch. Wait, that situation with my kid is not right. Wait, I got to get over there. But he's not that parent, so he doesn't get over there. But normally, we all, as parents, when we see our kids, because we're all watching them navigate, trying to figure out fucking life, whether it's in the playground or, one of my favorite stories. This is a good aside story. In our preschool, the kids, our grade school, for when they were in preschool, you were allowed to walk into the classroom and say, sit them down and just spend like a minute with them as they did an initial activity like coloring or whatever the fuck it was, and get them started on their day. And then you're like out of there like 3 minutes later. And there's this little table of 3 girls, and B goes to sit there. And one of the girls says, there's no room here for B. And I'm like, what the fuck? We have catty girls in fucking preschool, man, motherfucker.
Exactly.
Where the fuck is that shit coming from? But Amanda sees this happen and she's like, motherfucker. And that's that kind of intervention. She's like, gets in there and she's like, my child is sitting in this space and I'm going to make you guys like her, motherfuckers, because she's awesome. Right. And that's what you think of your children. It's like, they're awesome. They need to be protected. You got to keep your eyes on them when shit starts to go down, but he doesn't. And so what happens?
It's interesting too, because Antonella in that regard is already seeing him as the father figure.
Exactly.
Right. Like it's already like you're already as the watcher and the viewer, like, come on, this is your role now, man. Like, you're in that sense. So it's interesting. The transition is happening. So anyway, what happens here is, his childhood friend, this woman, actually says, you're lying. Your mother's not a teacher.
Right.
Your mother prostituted you. I know this. And then obviously, Rosetta is like, what? She's devastated. She gets up and she runs out. And at that point, Antonio runs out and chases her. And this is a moment where, like, unlike the other chase, where it was really strange and awkward for him, he does catch her. And she says to him, I want to leave this place. Like, I need to go to someplace safe. And I think that's the next point. So even the childhood home for Antonio was not entirely safe.
No.
And, you'll find that again and again in this movie. So at that point, they're off to the next point. And it's kind of a nice transition. They're running on that crazy busy street, and you're seeing the cars come as she's running, and you're like, be careful, Rosetta, be careful.
Yeah. And he is like, it's like, that's my family. He's basically saying, you're part of my family. That woman, I'm going to fucking throw her out. Like, fuck her, it's awesome, and she feels this, but she's still like, she knows to that group now, because, literally that friend shows a tabloid where her eyes are redacted, but her jowls, and it's very clear, like, oh, that's Rosetta. And she recognized her, and she shows this tabloid cover to Antonio's sister, and Rosetta's very keen. And she's like, I know once they know, that'll change how everybody treats me, and I can't handle that. Right. And so
she's right.
Very smart. She's totally right. It's, it's very important. And this is why the lie initially of saying like, oh, I'm the colonel or the sergeant's kid. This is the sergeant's kids. And he recognized that importance, but they get on the ferry to make the next stop to Sicily. And they are technically going to another orphanage effectively, right? Another institution. And it's in Sicily, and they get on the ferry. And it's important because not only did, Antonio, go and rescue kind of Rosetta, but Luciano came out and saw it. right?
Yeah, exactly. And
He
that's really seals it.
Yeah, and so Luciano finally, and we're like 2/3 through the movie, right? He finally talks to Antonio, the Carabinieri, who's no longer just an official. He's the beginning of the glimpse of a protector. But the initial conversation is really important because it's kind of fucked up, right? Because he asks, it's like, how long is it going to take? And you're like, you think he's going to be like, oh, and it's funny. He's like, oh, so you got a voice, it's like, I don't know how long it's going to be. And then he starts to talk, and he says, my sister, don't trust her. She's just going to fool you. And it's like, I don't want anything to do with her. I want to find my dad when I'm
Yeah.
15, and I'm going to go travel. And in the way that it's unlike when he failed initially with Rosetta, right, in the bathroom that led to like kind of forcing her back to the waiting room of the train. He doesn't fail with his first interaction with Luciano.
No.
He gets immediate. It's like, hey kid, you don't know what you're talking about. You've gotta give your sister some slack, and yourself, of course, because you're
Yeah.
fucking kids.
You're just kids,
Yeah.
which is like, should be the anthem of the movie.
Yeah.
You guys are 11 and 5 being asked to be 50 and 40, dealing with, the world of an uncharted space of, obviously prostitution and what it means in the wake. And they have no guidance, right? They have two Carabinieri, one who jumped ship and the other one who's a kid, right?
Yeah.
Who's himself trying to figure out, what do I do here?
Yeah. Yeah. And so he makes this decision, and this is like his first like real, like he's working outside of the system, and he decides like, you know what, we're going to take a day, and he rents a hotel room to create this space for them. It's like, let's just be a family on vacation for a day, in a sense. Like he doesn't realize he's doing this exactly, right?
Yeah.
And he gets two adjacent rooms, and the kids are like, what the fuck are we doing? These
and
really
the kids are like, are you paying for this? Is the state paying for this? Where's the money coming from? I love that small detail where the kids are like, wait, how can we do this?
Yeah, because it's a really nice little hotel room.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's the beginning of also Rosetta finally opening up, because she like, everybody's supposed to go to bed, and Antonio gets up because he can't sleep, and he finds Rosetta out on the closed like outdoor restaurant that's part of the hotel or something, and he gets her talking, and she tells him about what happened, and he encourages her. It's like, you don't have to tell me so far, but she asks like, what do you think is going to happen to my mother? And he's like, I don't know, and she just is like, I keep dreaming of her dying. I want her dead.
Yeah.
Right. And she's like, I want to run away. I want to be by myself. And it's like, why won't you let me go? And, this is an important difference, because he's saying no, not as someone who's like, I have to get you from point A to B as a courier bringing you, on this trip. Now it's more of like, no, I'm your parent. You're not fucking going anywhere. We got, that's like a nightmare if you disappear,
Exactly. You can't. We got to deal with this. Right?
Yeah. And so he's no longer the authority of a policeman. He's more like, it's like he's setting boundaries like a parent would. Right.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw this movie, and I remember where I saw it. I saw it in like Los Angeles in the Beverly Mall. And it was at one of those Lamel multiplexes. And I remember at the point after the night in the hotel where they go and they ride, and there's all these tourists riding bikes. And then they come in the car.
Yeah.
And they just kind of pull up next to the beach.
Yeah.
And then there they are at the beach.
Yeah.
And I think actually the background is a moment from that. And they actually start to just kind of live a different life, right?
Yeah.
As if the film kind of like went into like, hey, this is a small nuclear family, San's mom, on the beach, having a little vacation and enjoying themselves. Like, it's the first time in this movie, really, you get to this point of like, oh, it's not all, blood, darkness and horror,
Yeah.
right? Like there is some light in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, there's two things about it that's, it's like this is where Luciano really opens up. And, it's sad. It made me think about it, like, being a child of divorce and like navigating relationships that my mother would get into. And some guys would be really cool, you know?
Yeah.
And you would like, there was this guy who had me, I watched Moonraker, my first James Bond movie, right?
The
Because he took me
best.
to it. And it was like, he understood things that boys are interested in, right? And you attach yourself to these people, right? And you start to like,
Yeah.
have fantasies of what it's like to have this kind of person in your life. And that's really what Luciano's doing here, right? He's talking, it's like, how did you become, well, that comes later. He talks about like they have lunch after the dinner. But first, it's like Luciano is still a little reticent because his sister walks away and he's like, let her go, let her go. She needs her space. And he tries to lighten the mood and talking about like, hey, the institution will go, it's on the beach and you'll probably get to swim. And the kid's like, fuck you, I don't know how to swim. And that turns into him like, teaching him. It's like, okay, let's take our clothes off and I'll take you to how to swim. Let's just do this thing. And he does it. And it's really funny because it's like really, it's like sloppy paddling. And what's important though is, and then we see also Rosetta witnessing this and she's connecting more deeply with him and goes into her brother's backpack and finds the photo and of that the grandmother is given to Luciano of him in the Zorro outfit. And this like literally leads to this full grin, and it's like
Yeah.
the fantasy is really like in full course here. And then they have lunch, and my God, like Luciano is like they're making jokes about being a carabinieri. They're bad jokes. And then he makes a joke about bulls and banging things. It's like,
yeah, it's such a weird joke.
It's such a dirty joke. And he's like, what are you doing, kid? Like,
but you laughed, like, right?
But you laughed, huh? Yeah.
And then there's a scene where they're almost tourists. They're hanging out with French tourists. They're in the city, which look like something like Ragusa, which is far south Sicily, but it's just one of those beautiful Sicilian cities.
Uh-huh.
And like everything's like whitewashed or sandblasted. It's just gorgeous. And then there's two French women who they're kind of playing with, and they're like, hey, Antonio, do you find them attractive? And like they're trying to hook them up because they need a mom figure now because the old mom was kind of broken.
Yeah.
And so like there is like full blown, now they've gone into like the fantasy, like you said, like this is a family fantasy. Like we can live with Antonio. We love Antonio. Like this would be a life we would imagine and could see ourselves in until we're an adult,
Yeah. And he like, they start making, it's like, you'll visit us at the institution, Luciano. It's like, and it's like, and he all immediately tests him, and it's like, well, what if I go to another institution? It's like, hey, I'm your guardian now. Like he says it, I will look out for you. And, and there's this earlier moment where Rosetta's like, I'm writing you a postcard. And it's like, I'm right here. Just give it to me. And he's like, no, I want you to read it later. Like she's making these like connections about what this moment means and wants to communicate it in a way that allows her to communicate it without having to be so naked with her emotions in that moment. But it's not going to fucking last. Like you can feel it the way that this movie is presented itself. And it's like, you're just like, how are they going to navigate the fucking this up? Because it kept going much longer than I expected, to be honest.
And I struggle with the end. We can talk about the end.
Yeah.
I do. We have a scene to get of before we get to the end, but I struggle with that. Like depending on if you're a pessimist or an optimist, you can look at it both ways. But the kind of action moves to the first disappointment, I imagine, is the French woman who's taking pictures with the camera has her camera stolen.
Yeah.
And, basically Antonio, who can do no wrong now, chases him down. The guy pulls out a knife. He's like, look, I'm a carabinieri. Pulls out his badge, says, don't do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Nails his ass. Takes him back then to the local Sicilian carabinieri office, and basically they're in there for a while. The kids are outside waiting, and the first disappointment is the two French women come out
Yeah.
And they actually say goodbye to the kids, but they refer in French to the girl as a prostitute.
Right.
And you could see, Rosetta like, oh, fuck. But then the other scene, and this is the scene where Antonella said she's so deeply, kind of viscerally, like, identified with Antonio. Is Antonio's in there and he's basically kind of happy, right? He's kind of a hero. He's on the way to kind of get his kids. He's got this relationship. He wants to see them land well. And, the Carbonieri across the desk, who's kind of looking at him, is like, buddy, you got bigger problems than that thief and those French women. You got 2 kids out there that you've been AWOL with for several days now. And there are questions. Where's your other partner? Like, basically reading him the riot act and asking for his badge. And just in a brilliant moment, Antonio's just like, his face just like, it melts. Like, he's like,
this is where
all his happiness, all his like, I'm doing the right thing is just fucking gone. And Antonella's like, that in these systems that we live in, particularly Italy for her, that happens all the time. Wow. You think you're doing something right. You think you're in this moment of like, hey, and someone just knocks your ass down with, actually, that's not right. These are the rules. You're out of line. And like, there's that real sense of how violent the system is,
right,
despite any morality about what's wrong or right or what should or needs to be done. And that system against the morality of what it means to be human are in such kind of, I don't know, agonistic turmoil, if you will, at that point. So she was like, that point for her was like, that was the movie.
And it's really like, and it's kind of a full circle moment, because we start with this kind of very punishing system, right? And Antonio is a cog in, effectively. He's implementing it, and he's done, in a sense, what his sister and that family has done, is he's navigated his way around it. But he doesn't get to land so well like his sister. It's like, oh, we figured out how to build a family and community. It's like, he loses his fucking job.
Yeah.
And he's destroyed. He's destroyed by it. And it's so nasty, because like, he immediately shuts down with the kids. Because he's compelled to still take them to the institution, which, by the way, that alone, like, it's like, if we're going to do a picking nits moment, it's like, the dude who just lost his job, he doesn't get to keep doing his job,
But this is where I had a very, maybe, I don't know, irresponsible or naive reading of the film. Like, he's falling asleep. They're asking him questions about what happened in there. He doesn't answer them, but he also doesn't explode.
No, he doesn't.
But he's falling asleep. He's tired. And he's like, you know what? Let's just rest here for a while before we go there. And that's where the movie ends.
Right.
And I think, like, maybe their story is not over.
You think, fuck this, he's going to take them?
I think maybe something. I don't know. I mean,
I didn't even imagine that. I didn't even imagine that, man. And I fucking love that. I hope that. Yeah.
That's it. Like, you want to imagine that Antonio is a special guy, and that his bond with those kids is strong enough that, like, he could reimagine his life with them. Is it probably practical? Is that probably what happens in the real life of this story? No. But as a kind of Hollywood, junkie with happy endings.
Yeah, me too. I'm so with you. I love this. Tell me this story. So he heads back to Calabrese. He kicks that woman out of the family house. He builds a third floor, and he finds a nice woman who doesn't mind the children, and they navigate a real family.
He gets a job in the whole, like, they need, people who know the system. So he's part of the whole Mani Puliti cleanup, right? He cleans up Calabria, right? He gets a job. He's actually the poster boy of how the system changes and how it's exhausted. And so he gets his job back. And in fact, these kids become like the new Italy. This is what's possible when Italy doesn't ignore all of its responsibilities to its most vulnerable. And so actually, it's a completely new day.
Oh, I like this. Okay.
You like it?
We got a sequel in the making for sure. What happens? That's a classic. Like, there's this movie podcast that I love, and And one of the ways that the categories that they talk about the films is like what happens the next day, right? The movie ends, it's like, okay, now let's talk about what would happen the next day. And it's often about the kind of, it's like, oh, that he definitely would ditch her, their relationship would never last, blah blah blah. And it's really funny. But I like this. The next day,
this is a complex one.
He drives them. He drives them. They take the train back to Calabrese, exactly. Right? Yeah.
Calabria. They go back to Calabria, right. And he basically rethinks all of it. And because he refuses the authority, in fact, he gets hooked up with people in his hometown. Like, yeah, we've been waiting for this. Look what's happening on the news. Like, you could actually do a compelling movie.
Yeah,
about that, based on the backstory of the politics that are happening in Italy at that moment.
I mean, my mind was like, he's not going back to Milan, right? No, because he doesn't have a job basically anymore there. And so I imagine he would retreat to his family. Totally. But I love this, that he would truly steal the children and steal for them.
There you go.
He would steal for them a real opportunity to actually be children.
Because they've been stolen. Already stolen by their mom, stolen by the system, right? Stolen. Their innocence has been stolen. They got nothing left. He, in many ways, is their only hope. And it actually makes sense when you think about it, that he should be pushed out of that system.
Right.
That uncaring system, he no longer fits in.
Right. Yep.
Because he is not that anymore. He's actually a caring guy who really wants to see these kids, taken care of.
Yeah.
So he doesn't fit in that system.
No, and he was just shell shocked, and he needed to nap and think. And I like
we get good on this one.
All right. Well, this is a great way to end it. We're back next week.
We nailed it, MBS. Nailed it.
And we are going to nail it next week with a completely different. We're going very far.
We're going back home. Yeah. We are going back home. But before we do go back home, and I'm looking forward to going back home, it's interesting to me, quick thing, just how much, as we started to go through this.
We should circle back to all these movies. Yeah.
It was such a great series.
Yeah, I love this. Yeah. Me too.
And the more we went into it, from Muriel's Wedding to White Balloon, I think it's really with White Balloon that it really started to open up for me. Like the way I went to these films and was able to access them is family through the relationship to state.
Yeah.
And more with Life is Sweet and Raise the Red Lantern, I find myself being pulled into this. And I'm wondering, and of course here with Italy as well, I'm wondering if maybe I'm pushed for those political readings because I'm thinking immediately like, this is a system I don't understand. This is a film culture I'm not as familiar with. So it's a really easy way in. You know what I mean?
I think it's what the directors are trying to do intentionally, right?
Yeah, I imagine. And it seems like it was in the air in the 90s. Look at that. We've done 6 of these films. All of them were deeply political about the family and the state. Yeah. And we could go deeper. Like, we just scratched the surface. I wrote a blog post about it, and people were like, have you seen this? You've seen this? You've done this? I'm like, whoa. But like, there's a lot more to be done, but it would be interesting to talk about the 90s independent movement like we have and think about this idea of outside the U.S. or even inside the U.S.
Yeah.
And in collaboration with this international movement, why was the family being projected in relationship to the state so often? So what does that look like?
Yeah, so here's the thing. It's like this moment in the 90s, in a lot of ways, for most of these films, was a hopeful kind of moment, right? It was a reflection on the past, but it was a bridge to kind of a hopeful future. And I think in even this film, which was really oppressive, like for these children, you described how maybe it is a hopeful future. And I like that reading too. And that's a lot of fun. But we're going to be going back to the space in which the terrifying 80s that was causing this need to find a hopeful future, which is going to be a lot of fun.
That's a great point. Yeah. So stay tuned.
Yes. All right, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.